Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning into another Supatease video, and MMR fixes are on the horizon. Starting next week, it might be the best time to start pushing for raiding and start getting some of those rewards that have been kind of choked away from you based on inflation at the moment. And in today's tier list, I wanted to give you my thoughts on the specializations that are going to be best suited for you to climb to the highest ranks of solo shuffle and what will make you feel like all of your efforts are the most rewarded for mastering in today's tier list. And if you want to stay up to date with changes related to the game, tier lists like this, entertaining educational content, smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated on my long-term goal of getting to 100,000 subscribers. So thank you. Let's get started. Blood Death Knight. In solo shuffle, this is going to be a really tough class. Probably one of the harder tank specs to start having some success with. Definitely wouldn't recommend it for trying to go for rewards because its rating is going to be really deflated comparatively to a lot of other options. It's going to be really tough to climb for rewards. Frost Death Knight. Honestly, I'm starting to think that Frost is likely better than Unholy, mostly because of its kind of one-shot, grouped-up combo of damage. I'd say that it's likely still a bit of a struggle, but in certain lobbies where you can stack enemies up, it starts to work a bit better for you. We saw it in the tournament as well with Mez playing it in one game, not in the best-case scenario, but it definitely was showing some promise. Hopefully, the rework that's coming in 10.1.5 will really help you be competitive, and I'll be updating these tier lists as those changes are ongoing. But for right now, probably still going to be a bit more of a struggle. Unholy Death Knight, a similar story, and I actually think it's probably harder than Frost because you're not going to have that grip kind of cheese one-shot type where you can squeeze in a couple of wins. Honestly, Frosty K, if you're a new player, might be a good way of maybe getting 1800 for the transmog if you can master the one-shot combo, whereas Unholy, the sustained damage, not really there for you to really overwhelm anybody or be too threatening, and honestly, you're pretty squishy as these specializations, so definitely not a recommendation for solo shuffle. Havoc Demon Hunter, this is one that I would definitely recommend for solo shuffle, debating as to whether or not I want to put it in S or A. I think I'm going to toss it up into the S tier, maybe the A+. I've been playing Demon Hunter myself. I just actually recently got the 1800 transmog for it. It was a little bit more difficult than something like a Fury Warrior, honestly, just because of its squishiness relative to that. You got to be a little bit more aware defensively, but I still think it's probably one of the best if you're looking to master the specialization. It's just got a really well-rounded toolkit and does a huge amount of damage, and if you're good at it, you're going to be able to carry. So I think it's fair to say that it's on S tier. Vengeance Demon Hunter. This is actually not a bad specialization. I've played against it a couple of times now. It has the most crowd control of any spec in the game. Like if you're a tank player, honestly, this is the spec that you're going to want to go for. I'm putting it onto Frosty K tier. It's probably a bit harder than Frosty K to get a higher rating. Maybe that's unfair to put higher than Unholy. But I legitimately think it has potential. It has so much crowd control. And it's actually doing comparable damage to other damage dealers. So definitely keep an eye on it. I think it is better than the other tank specs. Balanced Druid. This is an obvious S tier with Cyclone, high winds, reducing healing, the amount of control you have over the game. You know, we had an interview with Waz at the end of the AWC where he said it feels like the subtlety rogue of casters where you can really have impact on the game. Really good damage. Definitely a great pick at the moment. Feral Druid, I think this one might be a bit tougher. You're not going to do like excellent in these wizard lobbies. You're still decently well-rounded, bring a lot of support for the team. I think it's going to be a decent pick, and your damage can just be really high in cleave lobbies, but you're a bit squishier, and I think it can be frustrating in some situations for solo shuffle, so it's a little bit lower. Guardian Druid, definitely not really going to be recommending. You're just going to really rely on your teammates to carry you in a lot of cases, and you're not going to really have much impact overall with this, so definitely probably want to avoid playing this. Resto Druid, I've been playing my Resto Druid again. Honestly, having more fun with it now than I have in like the more recent weeks and maybe even months on Resto Druid. You can, in certain lobbies, you just have healers that do more damage than you, and it can be tough. And you can't drink in solo shuffle, which is the main reason why it's more competitively viable. I think it's probably all right. I'm putting it here onto like the B plus, maybe the A tier. I think it is definitely an all right healer, but you'll start to experience some frustrations with it. Devastation Evoker, similar to the Frost Decay, I'm putting it slightly above, mostly because you can hit some just extraordinarily high crits. I've seen screenshots now like 250k Living Flames, and you can flip the coin and get a one shot and absolutely win lobbies. So if you're looking for something that you're not really trying to play the game well, you just want to run in, pop your cooldowns, and maybe grab a few wins and try and get 1800, it honestly might get you there. As far as like mastering it to the highest levels of play, you're probably going to start experiencing some frustrations towards the top end of the ladder on players that know how to shut down your cooldowns. So I think it's going to be limited in that sense, which is why it's coming in at the B+. Preservation Evoker, this is probably the best healer to pick if you really want to master a healer. Really well-rounded, the highest damage, the highest healing, really powerful emergency cooldowns, decent utility and crowd control to be able to support your team. Oppressing Roar is one of the best effects in the game. Definitely recommend the Preservation Evoker. Beast Mastery Hunter, similar to Feral Druid, I think maybe probably A. It's slightly squishier, but it does really good damage. It's really simple, and most of the time this is like the class where you'll see somebody backpedaling and they're still like 1900 and they don't even land their traps and they're still winning games. It's just because of how much damage it does. But I do think at the higher levels of the ladder, you're going to start to notice its squishiness, and like you're going to get blasted by these S tier classes stunning you and one-shotting you. So it's probably maybe A+. It's probably better than Feral Druid. But yeah, the defense starts to become more noticeable, I think, at the higher ranks. Survival Hunter, it's a really tough one for me. I think the set bonuses are awesome and it can do a lot of damage, but I think you expose yourself a lot more than Beast Mastery in terms of positioning, and you're going to be a target a lot of the time. So if you don't deal with those stressful situations, it's not going to be that good of a pick. I think you might struggle a bit more. It's probably like maybe fair assessment is A tier, maybe B+. It's definitely one of the hipster specs. It's less represented overall no matter what. Like even if it's really powerful, it's usually less represented, but it's definitely strong. Marksmanship Hunter, you're probably in the Frost Decay boat where you're squishy. You can kind of do a lot of damage in some situations, but most of the time you're useless, and you're really stationary is the main problem. So B tier I think is fair for Marksmanship Hunter. Arcane Mage and Solo Shuffle, again, this one can be really situational. You get these melee lobbies where you can kite them around the map and make yourself untouchable and feel really strong. You might get some caster lobbies where you're just getting dotted up and everybody's dying and you can't really find any sort of momentum for your team. Arcane Surge is similar to the Devastation Evoker one-shot, though, and will give you a lot of potential to be able to one-shot people, but it's definitely a lot harder. I'd say that it's not a coin flip class like the Devastation Evoker. It's going to be like more completely skill dependent, but the skill dependency is really high, and you're going to get some bad matchups. So B+ for right now. Fire Mage, I think that this is probably like an A+ or an A. I think you are squishier than a lot of the S tier options, and in a lot of lobbies it can be tough to win games as a result of that. And you're going to need to play the glass cannon build to really feel relevant and do a lot of damage, but it's really close, really close to be one of the top specializations. Frost Mage, this is again a coin flip class. You either get a lobby with a lot of melee DPS and you're chilling, ironically as a Frost Mage, or you get a lobby with a lot of casters and you're not really able to do much and it's really tough to even win a game. So coin flip, probably like a B+, middle of the pack in terms of possibilities for success. Mistweaver, not seeing a lot of Fistweaver. It's definitely fallen off. I think it can be harder than Preservation. You're kind of just like a very stationary sit in the back type of healer now for maximum output. I think I want to put you like A+, maybe A. Overall, I think your mana is the main reason that you're probably A+ or close to S. You have like some of the best mana aside from maybe Resto Shaman. So I think A+ is probably fair. Brewmaster Monk, it's getting better and getting better. I'd say like if you were gonna really just be trying to get a tank spec, I think again, like if I'm grading tanks, I think Unholy is probably easier to climb than the tank specs. So maybe something like this, although it feels weird putting it on B the way that I've organized this. You might just want to ignore the tanks other than Vengeance being really strong, honestly, with this list. Windwalker Monk can be really tough. Like, again, this is kind of a completely skill-based specialization. If you like high pressure and being squishy and trying to go glass cannon your way to the top, you can make it work. But there's a lot of classes that stun and kill you and pump you. And a lot of the best classes like Boomkin can peel you really easily, and it can be really tough. So I think it is harder to climb. You are probably better than these classes, though, in terms of consistency. So A feels about right for Windwalker in terms of overall power. Holy Paladin, not going to be recommending this. it's going to be really tough. Hopefully the rework again in 10.1.5 is going to help you out, but it's going to be really tough. Prop Paladin, you get your own lobbies. This is a spec, can't be ranked basically, because you just only queue into other Prop Paladin healers for solo shuffle. Retribution Paladin. This is one where if you get wizards, it's a little bit frustrating, but in melee lobbies, man, you still dominate with this. I've got a lot of lobbies, like I've played my warrior and I get a ret and they go 6-0 in a melee lobby. Play my boomkin and get them in a wizard lobby. They're still getting the same number of wins as me sometimes. I feel like it's probably A tier at the moment. It's still really defensively tanky. Again, its main limitation is mobility. So sometimes getting peeled too much on your cooldowns and the game gets dragged on and dampening stacks fast and your healing starts to fall off. It's the main reason that I think it's getting held back from the A or the A plus or the S tier at the moment. Discipline Priest, I definitely have felt the shield nerfs on my Priest. I still think that it is a strong option, but a lot of the other healers are going to feel more comparable to you. Mistweaver can be frustrating because they're just going to sit in the back and heal and out mana you. You got to kind of play on top of them, play aggressive. So it's probably coming in on an A tier for me for this round on solo shuffle. Holy Priest, it's been getting buff after buff after buff, and it's feeling slightly better. Again, it's still just a really low represented spec. I really don't feel like it's super potent at the moment. Like Chastise Sphere is the only main advantage going into Angel form to immune crowd control. It's kind of nice as a beginner healer, honestly, because you've got that 30-second windows of going into Angel form where you can't be kicked or crowd controlled, and at low rating, 30 seconds might be enough for your team to win. So like a low rated healer, I don't think it's that bad, but you'll start to notice that your potential gets more limited the higher that you climb. So I feel like a B is probably a fair position for Holy Priest at the moment. Shadow Priest, I'm putting this up on the S tier. It's really tanky, really durable, has a lot of good initiation crowd control, and a lot more damage now. You're going to be really rewarded for mastering the specialization. It's really good at the moment. Assassination Rogue, not too great. You know, in the tournament, we saw Assassination doing less damage than Subtlety in head-to-head matchups, which is not where you want to be as Assassination, because your main goal as that spec is damage output and you're squishier. So for me, it's probably coming in like a B, maybe a B+. Maybe a B. I really feel like B is fair. Like I see it as often as MM or Frost, and it's kind of the same type of deal. Squishy. It is a rogue with kidney shots, so it's got that over the other specs. Some like maybe this is more fair for a B+, but I think it could be tough in solo shuffle. Outlaw Rogue, I'd never see this spec. It's basically just disappeared with Unholy. While you might be able to make it work, my information on this one is very limited, and I think just based on that, it's probably not going to be too great of an option. Subtlety Rogue, this is one of the best specs. If you want to hard carry the game and you want to dominate the battlefield, if you get good and master this spec, you will feel really strong on it. But again, if you're a beginner, it's going to be really tough. It's going to be a lot harder. So this is definitely one for people that want to stay dedicated to the spec, but you will be able to climb the ranks really fast with this specialization. Elemental, this one's tough to rank because how many people are cheating on it. Like you can, if you're cheating and using third-party programs to play the character for you, it can be really easy to climb the ladder. So I want to say like A+ or S. Similar to Fire Mage, I think there are some times where you're squishy. Other times you got a lot of hybrid healing at the moment, Essential Guidance and Earth Shield and Healing Stream. You can really support the team, get a lot of damage out. In Wizard lobbies, you're going to feel really strong. Melee lobbies, not so much. So probably a little bit less than Moonkin or Shadow Priest in that regard. So it's probably a fair assessment to say about A tier. For Elemental. Enhancement Shaman, this guy kind of disappeared. It's doing okay sustained damage, but the burst, like the top end edge that it had before, is kind of lost. So I don't feel like it's S tier anymore. It's kind of starting to fall more into the A tier category, similar to Feral Druid. Maybe it's slightly better than Feral Druid. And Windwalker, I want to say it's probably slightly better. I don't think it's slightly better. I think the disruption on it is a lot more potent with wind shear and grounding in the wizard lobbies that you're going to be able to get. So maybe slightly better, but it's definitely not S tier. It's fallen off slightly. Resto Shaman, this one's got the best mana. You can definitely out mana a lot of healers. I want to say that you're probably A+. We saw Resto Shaman take the tournament in North America, but we didn't see it at all in Europe. I think that's just more of a, EU tends to play more Resto Druid than Resto Shaman, but a lot of the Resto Druids looked much weaker on the specialization, even with them being veteran and BlizzCon champion players in their matchups playing it. So I think there is a bit of a gap in terms of the power, and the tournament representation is probably based on inexperience with the healer. Affliction, this is a really hard one to climb, man. Like sometimes you get a good lobby and you can do really well and just do tons of damage. Other times you get a bad lobby, it's really tough to get anything going. You got no crowd control. So I want to put it on B. It's like maybe B+. It's probably not as somewhere here, somewhere B and B plus. This one's a little bit tougher to grade. Demonology Warlock, this is one of the best specs in the game to play. You're gonna have full control with crowd control, with damage. People don't respect Tyrant because they're not in voice comms, so you can cheese a lot of wins with that. People get frustrated and trinket crowd controls from you because you got so many, which then lets you set up win conditions later in the game. It's a great class to play in solo shuffle. Destruction Warlock, I think this one has honestly fallen off a bit since the damage nerfs. We saw it not represented nearly as much as I was anticipating in the tournament since those nerfs. Based on my prediction tier list for the tournament. So I definitely think it was hit the hardest of all the classes that got nerfed. I think it's probably fallen down a couple of pegs here. I'm going to be putting it into the A tier, a little bit lower than the other casters. Still has multiple schools of magic in that regard, so you're going to feel powerful there, but getting run down and now your instant cast damage is a little bit lower. It's going to be a bit more tough. Fury and Arms. These are two specs that are really hard to rank and grade against each other, because if you look at ladder representation, Arms has a huge amount of representation, but I think Fury is better when it comes to pushing. I think Arms can get lobbies where you're kind of just like chasing casters, never able to hit anything, and just die, and it's kind of pitiful. So I'm kind of throwing you onto the A tier because of that. Whereas Fury Warrior, I feel like because of the self-healing and sustainability, you can kind of rampage your way through a lot of these wizard lobbies, and you're still pretty tanky in the melee cleave one, so I think you're actually slightly better. I'm putting it onto the A plus tier. Prot Warrior, we're not gonna rank this one. It's just too tough to rank. I think it's going to be really tough to climb as tanks in general, even with inflation coming into the bracket. It's just the tanks had the lowest ratings of all the classes, so definitely wouldn't recommend them. So kind of take the tanks with a grain of salt here when you're looking at the tier list, because all the tank specs are way harder to get rating in solo shuffle than any of the other specs, even though Outlaw and Unholy are on the same tier here. As Brewmaster, it's like you can almost think of the tanks only against the tanks and everybody else against everybody else. But I think this is a fair assessment of the classes that if you spend time mastering, like, you are going to absolutely destroy the solo shuffle bracket. These guys come with a couple of little weaknesses, and not just, they're a little bit cut below the top end. And these guys are in a solid position but have some weaknesses. These guys are either they're just completely missing something, a component, or they get completely countered in some situations, or they've got coin flip mechanics where they only can one shot, or they're useless. So those are the main drawbacks of the B plus. And then the B tier is like, you know, they can maybe cheese a couple of kills with some one-shot damage, but you're stationary, kind of weak and susceptible, and it's gonna be a little bit tougher. And then Unholy and Outlaw, it's gonna be really hard. It's just your damage is not in a position for sustained damage meta, and you're a bit squishier, although maybe Outlaw isn't as squishy. But other than that, this is it. This is my current solo shuffle tier list for Dragonfly Season 2. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and the discussion, and good luck on your climbing with the MMR changes.